switching gears now to a very, very important conversation. We'll be heading over to the UK. They are once again confronting questions around political stability. This is after the country potentially seeing its seventh prime minister in just 10 years, a striking indication of the going turbulence at the highest level of government. And we'll be talking to British journalist, author, and public speaker, Dr. Yvonne Ridley, to get insight on why is the UK in a cycle of constant leadership change. Dr. Ridley, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me onto the show.
No, pleasure is all ours. I think the biggest headline coming out of the weekend is obviously the shakeup in the
Yes,
leadership
we
in
seem
the
to
UK.
have. Can you hear me? We seem to have a connection problem.
There seems to be a bit of a lag. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well now.
Yes, I want to jump right into it. How unusual is it, Doc, for a country like the UK to be approaching its seventh prime minister in just a decade? From your perspective, why is so much instability when it comes to leadership
Right.
in the UK?
I didn't quite hear the question, but I know that you were wanting to talk about the turmoil in
Yes.
British politics at the moment. And what we're seeing is, forget a game of musical chairs. Number 10 is running like a high stakes eviction service. Following Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer's resignation, we are about to see our sixth Prime Minister in just a decade. At this point, the keys to Downing Street aren't even being handed over. They're simply being left on the doormat for the next optimist. The comings and goings have been so dizzying that even the poor Downing Street cat, Larry, is the only permanent resident. The electorate is dizzy from all the U-turns and leadership exits, and Westminster is now gearing up for an Andy Burnham coronation to see if the former Manchester mayor can finally break the curse. It's gripping, albeit exhausting, and it's pure political theatre. And if you remember, we started off in 2010 with David Cameron, who was the ultimate political gambler, who blew up the casino, smooth, polished, and oozing PR confidence. He thought that he could silence the Eurosceptics in his party with a quick referendum. Well, we know how that turned out. The British public voted to leave the European Union, having lost the biggest bet in modern history. So Cameron walked off from the podium outside Downing Street and left the country to clear up his mess. He was followed by a woman famously dubbed the Maybot for her rigid mechanical repetition of the phrase strong and stable. And of course, I'm talking about Theresa May, who inherited a real poison chalice, and she then had to orchestrate the Brexit. And which was disastrous, and she called a snap election that destroyed her own parliamentary majority, and she was eventually bullied out of office by her own backbenchers. Then we had Boris, chaotic showman who treated Downing Street like some sort of university fraternity house. He won a massive landslide victory by promising to get Brexit done, but his style of bluff, bluster, and distraction uh, just finished him off.
mm,
He had thousands of minor scandals, but it was the wine-soaked lockdown parties in Downing Street that finally saw him off during COVID. And I think he went through about 60 ministers in his own cabinet before he was finally pulled off stage. Then we had Liz Truss, the political equivalent of a human grenade. She just blew up the economy and will probably always be remembered for her head to head longevity race against a live supermarket iceberg lettuce. And the lettuce lasted longer than she did. She resigned after 45 days as the shortest serving prime minister in British history. And oh yes, then we had Rishi Sunak, who
mm,
Mr. Smooth, the billionaire occupant of Downing Street, and he led the Conservative Party to their worst electoral defeat, handing power over to Labour in July 2024. And that's when we had the arrival of Mr. Rules, the
mm,
Keir Starmer, which, all we've had since he arrived was a grim parade of policy U-turns, internal cabinet fighting, and a total failure to connect with the public. And after just 20 months in office, following a string of devastating local election losses and an open mutiny by his own MPs, um, he, was on his way out and resigned yesterday. But I think that it's important to remember with Starmer that Israel and the wider conflict in the Middle East played a massive role in fracturing his support, acting as a major catalyst for his eventual downfall. So, although his exit was triggered by recent domestic failures, the toxic political fallout from his foreign policy on Israel essentially broke his party's unity from the very beginning. So, it's his original sin was his foreign policy. Um, which, when he arrived, it was his early handling of the Gaza war, I think,
mm.
that set the whole demolition show in motion.
Mm, mm. Um, Dr. Reed, I want to talk about Brexit. To what extent has Brexit almost reshaped internal party dynamics in the UK, and also political stability? And also, would you say this instability is primarily a Conservative Party issue, or does it reflect broader systemic challenges in British politics?
Well, Brexit was devastating for British politics, and it still polarizes today because there are people like me who say that Brexit finished off uh, Britain's standing in Europe. But there are others who say that Britain was able to stand on its own 2 feet once it was out of Europe. The problem is geographically, Europe is our neighbor. We'll forever be involved in Europe. They are our closest trading partner. And so many of us feel as though Brexit was a big mistake. The real disaster was the handling of the Brexit between Ireland and the mainland, and it as I say, many of us believe that it has just been a total disaster, and it did fracture relations in Europe, and it caused an immense amount of red tape, which of course the European Union is notorious for. But we look around at other alliances, and I would have thought that Britain would be far better off uh, trying to go for BRICS than Brexit.
Mm, mm. And on the ground, how is it all being perceived by the British public? This musical chairs, as you mentioned in leadership, is it seen as dysfunction or just simply part of political accountability? If it's not working out, then get the next best person for the job.
Well, it's not as easy as that, because all we are getting is more chaos, new rules, old election promises that seemed attractive at the time have long been forgotten. And some people have said, well, the country is just ungovernable. It's certainly polarized. People
Mm,
are very angry. And I think it's the double standards and inequality and the ever widening gap between rich and poor, which has really been ripped wide open with this Strait of Hormuz fiasco, which has hit everyone in the pocket. It usually takes some time for economic policies to trickle down, but this has really kicked us all hard.
mm,
And from the van driver going to fill up petrol to the housewife going to the supermarket and not being able to uh, buy everything that she wants because food prices have rocketed. And I think that it's affected South Africa as well. And
mm,
it's just, once ordinary people are starting to be able to join all the dots and see a direct correlation between the contents of their purse and the people in power, it, politics has taken on a new sort of importance now. In People are becoming more politically aware, and they
mm,
are beginning to realize that foreign policy is very important. And of course, Britain, with its empire in the last century, used to be the go to country um, for foreign policy and stability. And now, we're a joke.
mm, mm, mm. I want to wrap up the conversation with maybe you giving us insight on Andy Burnham. He looks like he's, the front runner to become the next prime minister of the UK. Any insight on his politics? What is he all about?
Well, when you get a close look at Andy Burnham, you realise that he is another Zionist, another Labour friend of Israel. And during one leadership contest about 10 years ago, when he was trying to become the Labour Prime Minister or the Labour leader, he said the first country that he would visit as Prime Minister would be Israel. And you look into his background, and even just the other day, he danced around using the word genocide for Gaza. He's in the pay and sway of the Zionists, and really the pro-Israeli lobby weren't bothered when their poster boy Keir Starmer looked as though he's in serious trouble, because by this time they'd already bought and owned half of the uh, British Labour cabinet. And so Andy Burnham coming in is sadly not going to make any difference at all. He's bought and owned by Israel. If he wants to make an impact, then what he should do, and this would cause a furore, he should have an amnesty, allow all of the Corbynistas back into the party, and invite Jeremy Corbyn back in. Now that would be something, wouldn't it? But
Mm,
of course that isn't going to happen. But Labour is a party in turmoil, and Andy Burnham is not the king of the north, as he's called, who's going to be able to fix it unless he distances himself and stops taking Israeli money or any sort of money from the pro-Israeli lobby, and proves to be his own man. And it'll be interesting to see what his relationship is with Trump. Donald Trump
mm,
didn't like Keir Starmer at all. Um, and I'm not so sure that Andy Burnham is going to be his cup of tea either. He's a very charming person, but well, we'll have to wait and see. But I think Larry the cat is going to have he's the one that's experiencing all the turmoil at the moment.
mm. Really interesting times ahead when it comes to UK politics, Dr. Ridley. But thank you so much for giving us insight on the reality on the ground, and I hope we chat again soon.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
There you go. Yeah, I think really, really interesting times. I seeing what's currently unfolding in the UK. Keir Starmer resigning, and in what 10 years, there's going to be a seventh prime minister in the UK. What do you make of it? Do you think this is what democracy is supposed to be? Um, Yvonne really seems to disagree. It's not easy as if it's not working out with one person, then get another character in. Running a country that is as complex as the UK requires some sense of stability and a leadership that is concrete. There's a lot, especially the UK being, one of the countries that is, leading the way when it comes to policy, not only within the UK in itself, but the world over, and the world being so yeah, being what it is right now, I think you would at least expect some sort of stability from a country like the UK to have foster conversation and to usher the world into I think what we all want the world to be. But yeah, that doesn't seem to be the case, and it's quite concerning. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with you right after this.